Greetings. In this video, I want to look at a subtle grammatical point that was made by Zion Lexx during a discussion which aired on the Sa Neter University channel back in December of 2021. Now, before we jump into this, I just want to offer the disclaimer that although I'll be disagreeing with Zion Lexx in this video, I do not intend this video disrespectfully towards him. I would prefer that we think of this video as one student of Hebrew sharing something with another student of Hebrew, and I figured some viewers might find this valuable or interesting as well. So I'll share a link to the full discussion in the video description, but here I'm just going to show a 1-minute clip. Now, Zion Lexx made a grammatical point, and then from there he offered an exegetical point, a point, sharing his interpretation based on the grammatical point, based on that aspect of grammar. But however, in this video, we're merely going to focus on the grammatical point. We're going to focus on the grammar without getting into the subsequent interpretive framework. But with that, we'll pick this up at the 36-minute, 28-second mark and fair use.
The next word is ba'aniot, which is translated as in the ships, not simply in ships, because let's do grammar. Again, teaching. If you look at prefixes and suffixes in biblical Hebrew, you have the prefix lamed, which means 2 or 4. Under it is 2 dots, right? And you see them in a vertical position. That is pronounced as le, and that means 2 or 4. Next to it is a straight line, and then a line and a dash coming down like a T, giving you the sound ah. The vowel here is called patak. The vowel here is called kamatz. When the kamatz or patak is under the lamed, it no longer means simply 2 or 4. It means to the or for the. Same thing with the letter bait. The letter bait with the vowel called shawah simply means in or with. With a patak or kamatz, it now means in the or with the.
Okay, so the grammatical point that Zion Lexx was making hinged on the diacritic, which is under the prefix. He was noting that if the schwa, taking the form of those 2 vertical dots, appears under the prefix, like what you see on the right of your screen, that would be typical of the absence of a definite article. On the other hand, if a patach or kamatz appeared under that letter, like the 2 options you see on the left of your screen, that would be typical of a definite article which has been assimilated into that prefix. So the definite article is there even though it's not written, right? Again, it's a subtle grammatical point. Now, I would say that the point that Zion Lexx was making is generally correct. However, this is not always the case. And to illustrate that, here's a quick question. What if the prefix has a segol under it, like in this example from Judges 9:15? Note the diacritic under the first character, marked in blue. Those 3 dots, organized in a sort of triangle formation, are called a segol. Now, to explain what's going on here and why it's relevant, note that the next character, which is the first letter of the word, of the noun that the prefix is attached to, note that that letter has 5 dots under it. That's a combination of the schwa, which we mentioned earlier, the 2 vertical dots, and the segol, which we just mentioned. So it's a combination of schwa and segol. And note that the segol under the second character mirrors the segol, which is under the first character, under that prefix. And note that the schwa, those 2 vertical dots, are standing in between them. And with that in mind, let's return to the word that Zion Lexx looked at. And note that the first letter after the prefix, which is to say the aleph, has a schwa and a kamatz under it. And note how it too mirrors the kamatz under the prefix. With both these words that you see on your screen, think of the diacritic under the prefix as mirroring the diacritic which comes after those 2 vertical dots, after the schwa. In Hebrew grammar, that combination of a schwa and a second diacritic is called tanuach hatufa. So let's keep that in mind. Let's keep that phrase in mind, tanuach hatufa. Let's keep that in the background of our minds as we look at a couple of books. On the right is a book by Naḥum Karmi titled Peraqim Betorat HaShem. And on the left is a massive work, an amazing work, titled A Grammar of Biblical Hebrew. That second work, the work on the left, is actually Takamitsu Muraoka's translation of and revision of Paul Joüon's Grammaire de l'Hébreu Biblique. I'm mainly looking at these 2 works because they were hard copies which were within reach for me. But jumping right in, we'll begin with Karmi's work. And, this is a book from 1982. And we're going to start at page 148. And there one finds a brief bit on what appears, quote, lifnei tanua chatufa, before that diacritical combination I mentioned called tanua chatufa. And in all the examples he gives, the diacritic before the shva mirrors the diacritic after the shva. If the first letter of the noun has a patach after the shva, the prefix has a patach. And if it has a kamatz after the shva, the prefix has a kamatz. And if it has a segol after the shva, the prefix has a segol as well. And with that, I'd like to now turn to page 151, where the author addresses this phenomenon, writing the following, quote, Lifnei tanua chatufa taboa tanua chatana, hamakbila tanua chatufa, end quote. Which means before the tanua chatufa comes the little tanua, which corresponds to or parallels the tanua chatufa. So what is being alluded to here is that when, for example, the first letter of a noun has a shva with another diacritic, the prefix which precedes that letter has the same diacritic. And again, Karmi gives examples, segol before and after shva, kamatz before and after shva, etc. And now, with that, let's corroborate this rule of thumb with the other work that we have in hard copy, that being Joüon and Muraoka's Grammar of Biblical Hebrew. So this particular volume was published by the Pontificio Instituto Biblico, which is to say the Pontifical Biblical Institute in Rome. It's related to the Vatican. And we're going to turn to page 104 to look at section 35e. And here, there's some discussion on what Zion Lexx alluded to. The definite article is assimilated by certain prepositions. Well, here the text says syncopated by the preposition, rather than assimilated, but basically it's the same thing. And this is where Zion Lexx's point about how the presence of the definite article is conveyed in the diacritics, that point comes out here, right? But then it's noted that there are certain situations, quote, where the spelling is materially identical, both with and without the article, end quote. And one of the examples given is when the first letter of the noun has that combination of shwa and kamatz. In such an instance, the prefix will also have a kamatz, irrespective of whether a definite article is intended or not. Now note that that was precisely the sort of form which appeared in the construction that Zion Lexx appealed to. The prefix had a kamatz, and Zion Lexx argued that that meant a definite article was present. But the more nuanced reply is that in this case, not necessarily, as the next letter, the first letter of the noun after the prefix, had that combination of shva and kamatz. And if one would like to see this phenomenon, discussed in a Hebrew grammar that's available online rather than just these hard copies that I have access to, what you see on your screen now is from Robert Ray Ellis's book, Learning to Read Biblical Hebrew. You can pause your screen to look over this excerpt at your leisure, or you can check the link to this precise page on Google Books, which I shared in the video description. But to sum up what was covered here, Zion Lexx's point about the diacritic would be right in a great many cases, but the precise construction he looked at is a different sort of case. Because the noun began with an aleph and had shwa and kamatz under it, the kamatz under the prefix does not necessitate a definite article. So contrary to what Zion Lexx said, it is not obvious that a definite article is present. Rather, a fairly straightforward explanation would be that the definite article is not present. Rather, the diacritic under the prefix was merely mirroring the diacritic under the shwa on the next character. And that's why English translations of Deuteronomy 28:68 rendered this construction in ships rather than in the ships. Now, I know this was somewhat of a subtle and technical point, but it seemed worthwhile to share the finer details on this, right? But with that, I'll close this video here. As always, I welcome any comments, questions, or objections, So feel free to share your thoughts, whether positive or negative. And either way, God bless.